What would you do if strangers suddenly claimed ownership over everything you loved? Your land, your livelihood, your future, and even your dignity disappeared overnight. Most people would feel powerless against such overwhelming control and oppression everywhere. Yet history occasionally produces individuals unwilling to accept injustice without resistance whatsoever. In the islands of Maluku, one man chose defiance instead of submission completely. His name was Thomas Matulessy, later remembered forever as Pattimura throughout Indonesia. He was neither king nor wealthy noble commanding vast armies or kingdoms. He was an ordinary man witnessing extraordinary suffering inflicted upon his people daily. Every unfair law deepened wounds already carved into Maluku's struggling communities deeply. Every forced demand reminded villagers that freedom seemed increasingly distant and unreachable. Yet oppression often creates something rulers fail to anticipate or understand completely. It creates determination strong enough to challenge even powerful colonial empires eventually. Pattimura would become the face of that determination during a dangerous era. His rebellion would shake colonial authorities far more than they expected initially. What followed became one of Indonesia's most inspiring resistance stories ever recorded. It began with anger but soon transformed into something much greater entirely. A struggle for dignity, identity, freedom, and the future of generations ahead. The island stood silent before a storm nobody could stop approaching rapidly. Colonial authorities believed they controlled everything through power, fear, and economic pressure. They underestimated the strength hidden inside people pushed beyond their limits completely. Soon, those people would rise together under the leadership of Pattimura boldly, and the colonial rulers would discover that fear can suddenly change direction. The hunted can become hunters when hope finally overcomes years of suffering. This is the story of Pattimura and the rebellion that shook Maluku. Early 19th century Maluku appeared beautiful, yet beneath beauty existed growing hardship everywhere. Colonial policies controlled trade, resources, opportunities, and nearly every economic activity. Local communities increasingly struggled under restrictions imposed without meaningful consultation whatsoever. Farmers worked tirelessly while benefits flowed toward distant colonial administrators instead. Families watched opportunities disappear beneath systems designed to prioritize foreign interests. Resentment grew gradually, spreading quietly through villages, ports, and marketplaces alike. Conversations became more emotional as hardships touched nearly every household repeatedly. Parents worried constantly about providing stability and security for their children. Community leaders discussed grievances but faced risks whenever criticizing colonial authority openly. Fear discouraged resistance, yet frustration continued accumulating beneath the surface steadily. Pattimura observed these conditions and understood something needed to change urgently. Remaining silent would only allow suffering to continue expanding year after year. He recognized that dignity mattered as much as survival itself sometimes. People were losing confidence in their ability to shape their futures independently. That realization troubled him more deeply than material hardship alone ever could. Oppression affects bodies, but hopelessness can imprison entire communities mentally forever. Pattimura believed those invisible chains needed breaking before genuine freedom emerged. His ideas slowly resonated with others experiencing similar frustrations and disappointments. Small discussions evolved into organized conversations about collective action and resistance. The colonial government noticed tension but underestimated its growing intensity completely. Officials assumed dissatisfaction could never unite scattered island communities effectively enough. They failed to recognize how quickly shared suffering creates powerful solidarity naturally. A movement was beginning to form beneath the surface of everyday life. And soon, that movement would erupt into open rebellion against colonial rule. Resistance rarely begins with battles. It often starts through whispered conversations first. Across Maluku, villagers gathered secretly to discuss impossible dreams of freedom together. They shared frustrations, fears, losses, and hopes hidden for many years previously. Pattimura listened carefully before encouraging unity among communities divided by geography. He understood isolated anger achieves little, but collective determination changes history dramatically. Slowly, trust developed between leaders willing to challenge colonial authority despite dangers. Traditional weapons were prepared while plans spread carefully between villages and islands. Every meeting carried enormous risks because informants could destroy everything instantly. Yet participation continued growing because desperation often overcomes fear eventually and decisively. People no longer wanted merely survival, they wanted dignity restored completely again. Pattimura's leadership inspired confidence precisely because he shared their hardships personally. He spoke not like a ruler, but like a fellow sufferer. As preparations intensified, tensions spread throughout Maluku like approaching thunderstorm clouds. Villagers understood success remained uncertain, while failure could bring devastating consequences everywhere. Families faced painful choices between safety and participation in dangerous resistance efforts. Some hesitated, but many concluded silence would guarantee continued oppression indefinitely. The movement gained momentum because its message resonated deeply with ordinary people. Freedom seemed distant, yet suddenly no longer appeared entirely impossible anymore either. Colonial authorities remained confident, believing local dissatisfaction posed limited strategic threats. They underestimated both Pattimura's leadership and the population's growing determination significantly. Beneath apparent calmness, rebellion prepared to emerge with extraordinary force very soon. The islands stood waiting for a moment capable of changing everything permanently. That moment arrived during May of 1817 with explosive consequences. The spark ignited, and Maluku would never remain the same afterward again. On May 16, 1817, rebellion erupted with stunning force across Maluku. The primary target was Fort Duurstede, a powerful colonial stronghold strategically. Capturing it would send an unmistakable message throughout the region immediately. Before sunrise, resistance fighters moved carefully toward their objective with determination. Hearts raced as uncertainty mixed with courage beneath the darkness surrounding them. Many understood they might never return home after this dangerous operation. Then the attack began, shattering the morning silence completely and unexpectedly. Resistance fighters surged forward while defenders struggled, understanding events unfolding rapidly. Confusion spread through the fortress as coordinated assaults struck multiple positions simultaneously. The defenders possessed advantages, yet surprise dramatically altered battlefield dynamics instantly. Pattimura's forces advanced relentlessly, despite risks and determined opposition encountered repeatedly. Momentum shifted toward the rebels as confidence grew with every success. Colonial defenders increasingly realized this uprising differed from previous disturbances significantly. This was organized resistance fueled by widespread frustration and powerful leadership. Fighting remained fierce, but the attackers continued pressing forward with conviction. Eventually, the fortress fell, delivering a symbolic and strategic victory alike. News spread rapidly, inspiring communities throughout Maluku and alarming colonial authorities. The impossible suddenly appeared achievable to people longing for meaningful change. Fort Duurstede became proof that colonial power was not invincible after all. For many islanders, hope returned where despair had dominated previously for years. Pattimura emerged as a respected leader whose influence expanded dramatically afterward. Yet victories often create new challenges alongside celebrations and renewed confidence. Colonial authorities would never allow such humiliation to remain unanswered indefinitely. The struggle was only beginning, and greater dangers approached from every direction. The capture of Fort Duurstede transformed Pattimura into a regional symbol instantly. Communities celebrated because victory demonstrated resistance could achieve tangible results successfully. Stories traveled quickly between islands, strengthening morale and expanding popular support. People who previously feared participation began reconsidering their positions and responsibilities. Hope possesses extraordinary influence whenever populations experience prolonged hardship and uncertainty. Pattimura became more than a leader. He represented collective aspirations broadly. Resistance networks expanded while communication improved between participating communities across islands. Volunteers joined efforts motivated by shared goals rather than personal rewards alone. Momentum continued growing as confidence replaced feelings of helplessness among many. Colonial authorities received alarming reports describing coordinated resistance activities throughout Maluku. Officials realized the uprising threatened broader stability and colonial prestige significantly. Additional forces were requested immediately to restore control before rebellion expanded. Pattimura understood victory required more than enthusiasm and symbolic achievements alone. Sustaining resistance demanded organization, discipline, resources, and continued community cooperation everywhere. He worked tirelessly to maintain unity despite increasing pressure and uncertainty. Different communities possessed unique concerns, requiring careful leadership and mutual understanding. Pattimura emphasized common goals capable of transcending local differences and divisions. His message resonated because it connected dignity directly with collective responsibility. Meanwhile, colonial reinforcements approached Maluku determined to crush resistance completely soon. Warships carried soldiers, supplies, and confidence born from imperial resources abroad. A confrontation seemed unavoidable as both sides prepared for difficult months ahead. One side fought for control, while the other fought for freedom passionately. The coming battles would test every assumption about courage, sacrifice, and endurance. Pattimura's greatest challenges still waited somewhere beyond the horizon ahead. Colonial authorities responded quickly, determined to reclaim control and restore dominance immediately. Reinforcements arrived carrying weapons, supplies, experienced soldiers, and renewed confidence from abroad. The empire possessed resources far beyond anything available to local resistance forces. Military commanders believed overwhelming strength would crush rebellion within months without difficulty. They underestimated how fiercely people fight when defending homes, families, and dignity. Pattimura understood direct confrontation against superior forces carried enormous risks for everyone. He adapted strategies carefully, relying upon local knowledge and community support networks. Forests, coastlines, and villages became critical elements within resistance planning efforts. Every pathway, river, and hill offered potential advantages against advancing colonial forces. Battles erupted unexpectedly as resistance fighters challenged enemy movements across multiple locations. Colonial troops encountered determined opposition despite expectations of rapid and easy victories. The conflict grew increasingly complex as both sides adjusted tactics continuously throughout. Villagers contributed information, supplies, shelter, and encouragement whenever resistance fighters arrived. Community involvement strengthened morale even when battlefield conditions became exceptionally difficult. Yet every confrontation carried consequences extending beyond military objectives and strategic calculations. Homes were damaged, livelihoods disrupted, and families separated by ongoing violence. The human cost increased steadily as the struggle expanded across Maluku Islands. Pattimura faced painful decisions balancing resistance goals against growing civilian suffering everywhere. Leadership demanded more than courage. It required responsibility for countless vulnerable lives. Each victory inspired hope, yet each setback intensified uncertainty and emotional strain. Colonial commanders remained determined, refusing to accept continued resistance indefinitely anywhere. They increased pressure through larger operations designed to isolate Pattimura strategically. The rebellion survived, but maintaining momentum became increasingly difficult with time passing. Greater challenges approached, threatening everything Pattimura and his supporters built together. Every struggle for freedom eventually demands sacrifices beyond what anyone initially expects. Pattimura witnessed those sacrifices growing larger with every passing week of conflict. Friends disappeared, families suffered, and uncertainty overshadowed daily life across communities. Celebrating victories became difficult while grieving losses occurring simultaneously around them. Resistance fighters accepted risks personally, but civilian suffering weighed heavily upon leaders. Pattimura carried responsibilities extending far beyond military operations and battlefield achievements. He often reflected upon consequences while considering future actions and strategic decisions. Every choice possessed potential benefits alongside dangers affecting countless innocent people. Leadership required balancing determination with caution during increasingly challenging circumstances everywhere. Yet abandoning resistance entirely would guarantee continued oppression and lost opportunities forever. That dilemma haunted many participants throughout the rebellion's most difficult periods. Freedom seemed worth pursuing, but achieving it demanded painful and uncertain sacrifices. Communities continued supporting resistance despite hardships because hope remained incredibly powerful. Shared purpose strengthened bonds between people facing extraordinary challenges together daily. Colonial authorities expected exhaustion eventually to weaken commitment and reduce participation. Instead, pressure often reinforced beliefs regarding the importance of resistance efforts. Nevertheless, resources became scarcer while enemy operations grew increasingly coordinated everywhere. Maintaining communication and unity required constant effort under dangerous wartime conditions. Pattimura remained determined, though he understood circumstances were becoming progressively unfavorable. The rebellion still possessed spirit, yet strategic realities could not be ignored. Powerful empires rarely surrender control without deploying every available advantage ruthlessly. Soon, colonial authorities would employ a weapon more dangerous than soldiers alone. It was ancient, effective, and responsible for countless historical defeats worldwide. That weapon was betrayal, and it would change everything dramatically thereafter, forever. History repeatedly shows that betrayal often succeeds where armies alone ultimately cannot. Colonial authorities recognized military pressure was insufficient for ending resistance permanently. Therefore, they pursued intelligence, informants, and opportunities hidden within personal relationships. Information became valuable currency capable of altering outcomes without major battles occurring. Somewhere within the shadows, trust began breaking under pressure and temptation. Details regarding resistance movements gradually reached colonial authorities through secret channels. Pattimura continued leading efforts, unaware critical information was leaking repeatedly elsewhere. His greatest threat no longer approached openly across battlefields or coastlines. Instead, danger emerged quietly through compromised trust and hidden conversations occurring. Colonial planners assembled intelligence carefully before organizing operations targeting resistance leadership. They understood capturing Pattimura could damage morale more effectively than battles. Eventually, the opportunity arrived, and authorities moved swiftly to exploit circumstances. Resistance positions became vulnerable as enemy forces closed surrounding routes strategically. Escape options narrowed rapidly while confusion spread among those involved directly. Then came the moment supporters feared yet desperately hoped to avoid. Pattimura was captured, delivering a severe blow to resistance efforts everywhere. News spread quickly, generating shock, grief, disbelief, and anger simultaneously throughout. Many wondered whether the rebellion could survive without its central leader. Colonial authorities celebrated, believing victory was finally within immediate reach now. Yet Pattimura refused allowing captivity to destroy his dignity or resolve. Even restrained physically, he remained a powerful symbol for countless supporters. Ideas survive imprisonment because they exist beyond walls, chains, and punishments. Colonial officials controlled his body, but not the meaning he represented. The final chapter approached, carrying consequences extending far beyond one lifetime. After capture, Pattimura faced imprisonment while colonial authorities prepared legal proceedings carefully. Officials wanted more than punishment. They wanted a public demonstration of power. The trial represented an attempt to discourage future resistance throughout Maluku completely. Colonial leaders believed severe consequences would restore fear among local populations. They underestimated how deeply Pattimura's example already influenced ordinary people everywhere. His reputation extended beyond military achievements into questions of dignity and identity. Throughout proceedings, Pattimura remained composed, despite knowing the likely outcome awaiting. Physical captivity could not erase convictions developed through years of experience. Supporters followed developments anxiously, hoping somehow circumstances might unexpectedly change. Those hopes gradually faded as authorities moved toward their predetermined decision. Pattimura received a death sentence intended to end resistance permanently across islands. Colonial officials expected execution would break morale and eliminate revolutionary inspiration. On December 16, 1817, the sentence was carried out publicly. Crowds gathered under heavy emotions as history approached a defining moment. Many witnessed not merely punishment, but a struggle between authority and conviction. Pattimura faced death with remarkable courage, refusing surrender even during final moments. His composure transformed the execution into something authorities never anticipated fully. Instead of displaying weakness, he demonstrated strength beneath impossible circumstances imaginable. The event ended a life, yet created a story impossible destroying afterward. Witnesses carried memories forward, sharing them across generations and communities alike. Colonial power succeeded physically, but symbolic victory proved far more complicated. Legends often begin where rulers believe difficult chapters have finally concluded permanently. Pattimura's death became a beginning rather than the ending authorities expected entirely. The rebellion lost its leader, but his message continued traveling forward. Colonial authorities believed executing Pattimura would erase resistance and restore obedience permanently. That assumption revealed a misunderstanding repeated throughout history by powerful empires repeatedly. They understood weapons, territory, and authority, but underestimated ideas and memory. Ideas survive because they can move freely between generations without physical limitations. Memory survives because people preserve stories carrying meaning beyond individual lifetimes alone. Pattimura's story continued spreading long after colonial authorities declared victory publicly. His struggle became part of a larger narrative about dignity and freedom. Future generations interpreted his actions as evidence resistance remained possible always. The man disappeared, yet the symbol grew stronger with passing decades. Here lies the greatest irony within Pattimura's extraordinary historical journey altogether. Colonial rulers won the battle, but lost control over his legacy. They silenced his voice, yet amplified his message beyond their expectations. Pattimura became remembered not for victory alone, but unwavering courage under pressure. His example demonstrated how ordinary individuals sometimes influence history in extraordinary ways. He possessed neither vast wealth nor unlimited armies supporting his ambitions. What he possessed instead was determination powerful enough inspiring countless people afterward. Across Indonesia, his name eventually became associated with resilience and resistance. Communities remembered sacrifices made by those refusing submission despite overwhelming odds. The struggle in Maluku reflected universal questions concerning justice, identity, and dignity. Those questions remain relevant wherever people confront oppression and inequality today. Pattimura's legacy reminds us that courage often begins with a simple decision: the decision to stand firm when surrender appears easier and safer instead. Sometimes one person's refusal to yield can challenge an entire empire successfully. That enduring truth explains why Pattimura's story continues inspiring generations today.